Some towns were built to thrive forever, but today they stand completely empty. Across the world, incredible cities and villages have been abandoned, left frozen exactly where history left them. These are 15 ghost towns and forgotten places that will leave you amazed at how quickly time can erase everything. Let's start with number 15, Varosha in Cyprus. On the eastern coast of Cyprus, near the waters of the Mediterranean, is a city frozen in time, Varosha. Once, this was a glamorous tourist destination that was filled with high-rise hotels, fashionable boutiques, and sun-soaked beaches. But today, it stands empty and silent, a seaside ghost town where the 1970s never ended. In the decades following World War II, Cyprus became a magnet for international travelers, and by the 1960s and early 1970s, it had transformed into a glittering resort city. Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and Brigitte Bardot were among the many who strolled Varosha's elegant promenades. The city was booming. New hotels and apartment blocks were rising rapidly along the beachfront. Shops imported the latest fashion trends from Paris and London, and nightclubs and cinemas thrived. The economy flourished. Then, in 1974, geopolitical events dramatically altered its fate. Following a coup backed by Greece and a military intervention by Turkey, Varosha's residents fled, expecting to return within days or weeks. They left behind homes, businesses, cars, and their possessions. But the return never came. The Turkish military fenced it off, declaring it a closed military zone, and for decades entry was forbidden to civilians, and this once vibrant city remained untouched. Inside Varosha, time just stopped. Despite nearly the passage of 50 years, Varosha was one of the most remarkable examples of an abandoned modern city. Visitors today, though, can view parts of it from designated areas or guided tours and look across empty streets, crumbling hotels, and the sparkling sea. It's a reminder of how quickly prosperity can be halted and how nature patiently waits to reclaim what's left behind. Varosha isn't a story about decay, it's one of patience, a quiet seaside city that was caught between history and hope. Number 14, Bodie, California. In the hills east of the Sierra Nevada mountains, Bodie is one of America's most perfectly preserved ghost towns. It's like a frozen snapshot of the Wild West, where dusty streets, weather-beaten wood homes, and rusting wagons tell the story of a once booming gold rush town. The story of Bodie begins in 1859, when prospector W.S. Bodie, from which the town takes its name, discovered gold near what would soon become Bodie Bluff. Although Bodie himself died in a blizzard just months after his discovery, word of the gold spread, and a small mining camp slowly took root in the remote terrain. For nearly 2 decades, it remained a minor outpost compared to the booming strikes at places like Virginia City, Nevada. But in 1876, the Standard Company discovered a deposit of gold-bearing ore, and almost overnight, Bodie exploded into a full-blown boomtown. At its height between 1877 and 81, Bodie's population soared to nearly 10,000 people. It had 60 saloons, gambling halls, a Chinatown district, churches, banks, a jail, hotels, breweries, and bustling red light district. The streets were alive with the clamor of stagecoaches, prospectors, and businessmen, and families all chasing the promise of fortune. But the harsh environment here made life difficult. Winters here were brutal, heavy snow, fierce winds, and temperatures plunging well below freezing. Many residents lived in small, poorly insulated wooden houses that faced months of isolation. In 1932, a devastating fire swept through much of the business district here, destroying many of the town's largest buildings. And after that, only a handful of residents remained. By the early 1940s, Bodie was officially classified as a ghost town. But instead of being forgotten, Bodie found a second life as a time capsule. In 1962, the town became a California State Historic Park. The authorities adopted a policy of arrest decay, which stabilized the remaining structures without rebuilding them. Today, about 110 buildings remain standing, remarkably intact. This is a place not of tragedy. It is a place where life simply moved on, leaving a beautiful, silent witness behind. In recent years, though, efforts have increased to further preserve Bodie against the ravages of time, including controlled stabilization projects and careful conservation of artifacts. Yet the town's essential spirit, it remains untouched. It's raw, real, and frozen somewhere between the dreams of the gold rush and the quiet power of the open sky. Number 13. Craco, Italy. On a steep hillside in southern Italy, the ancient town of Craco looks like something that was pulled from a storybook. It's a maze of stone houses, towers, and narrow streets that's just frozen in time, slowly blending into the landscape. Although it's been abandoned for decades, Craco remains one of Italy's most amazing ghost towns. Its history stretches back more than 2,500 years. It was originally settled by Greek colonists around the 8th century BCE, and this site grew into a medieval village under the control of various noble families and religious authorities. But by the 11th century, it was a thriving hilltop community. The town's layout, with the commanding view over the surrounding valleys, was strategic and it was picturesque. Life in Craco was never easy, though. It was built on a steep slope of soft clay and sandstone, and the town was always vulnerable to geological instability. Over centuries, the natural movement of the ground caused cracks in walls, foundations, and roads, and residents adapted as best they could. However, by the 20th century, the situation worsened dramatically. In the early 1900s, Craco's population began to decline due to immigration. Many locals left for North and South America, seeking better opportunities. Then, in the 1950s, a series of devastating landslides struck, triggered by heavy rains and poorly managed infrastructure. Buildings cracked and collapsed, streets buckled, and they split open. In 1963, the government ordered the full evacuation of the town. Residents were relocated to a new settlement, Craco, in the nearby valley. The historic heart of Craco, with its centuries-old churches, homes, and watchtowers, was abandoned almost overnight. Yet even in that abandonment, Craco didn't vanish. It's a place of incredible atmosphere. It's eerily silent, but it's filled with the echoes of the past. Efforts are underway to stabilize Craco and protect it from further collapse, and archaeological studies have uncovered layers of history beneath the streets, revealing Roman-era artifacts and ancient agricultural terraces. Craco is not a place of tragedy. It's a place of transformation, where the Earth's natural rhythms have reclaimed the dreams of builders long gone, and where beauty continues to thrive in unexpected ways. Number 12. Hashima Island in Japan. Off the coast of Nagasaki, an eerie silhouette rises from the sea, a fortress of crumbling concrete, buildings perched on top of a wave-beaten rock. This is Hashima Island. It's also known as Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, because of its ship-like shape. Hashima's story begins in 1887, when the Mitsubishi Company purchased this tiny rocky island to exploit its rich underwater coal seams. At first, the mining operations were small, but as Japan's demand for energy skyrocketed in the early 20th century, Hashima rapidly transformed into one of the world's most densely populated places. To accommodate thousands of workers and their families on such a small island, barely 480 meters long and 150 meters wide, Mitsubishi built massive multi-story concrete apartment blocks. Everything on Hashima Island was vertical. Narrow alleys, rooftop gardens, and even communal baths filled the space between the towering tenements. By the 1950s, more than 5,000 people lived on the island, packed into an area of less than 15 acres, creating a density far greater than that of modern Tokyo or even Manhattan. However, Hashima's fate was tied entirely to coal. In the 1960s, as Japan shifted its energy consumption towards oil and away from coal, the demand plummeted. Mining operations grew unprofitable, and in 1974, Mitsubishi officially closed the mine. Within weeks, Hashima was completely abandoned. Residents left everything behind: furniture, toys, machinery, household items, and it created a time capsule of mid-20th century life. Today, parts of Hashima are accessible by some boat tours with strict safety restrictions in place, and visitors can walk carefully designated paths and peer into the collapsed apartments. Efforts are underway to stabilize and preserve parts of the island, ensuring that future generations can witness this unique chapter of industrial history. Hashima is not a place of horror. It is a place of innovation and the powerful reminder that human creations, no matter how ambitious, are always at the mercy of time and change. Number 11. Glen Rio, Texas. Straddling the border between Texas and New Mexico, this tiny ghost town of Glen Rio is a perfectly preserved slice of mid-century Americana. It's a place where the dreams of the open road once flourished, and where today weathered signs and crumbling motels tell the story of a bygone era. Glen Rio's story begins in the early 1900s, when the Rock Island and Pacific Railroad extended its tracks across the border region. A few settlers arrived, setting up basic businesses to serve the railroad workers and travelers, and then by the 1920s, with the establishment of Route 66, Glen Rio's location, precisely on the Texas-New Mexico line, made it the perfect stopover point for weary travelers. The town capitalized on this position. On the Texas side were alcohol sales, they were legal there, bars and liquor stores sprouted up, and on the New Mexico side, where property taxes were lower, motels, cafes, and gas stations thrived. Glen Rio quickly grew into a pit stop featuring motels, diners, a grocery store, filling stations, and even a small movie theater. Signs advertising "First Motel in Texas" or "Last Chance for Gas in New Mexico" lined the dusty roadside. In its heyday from the 30s to the 1950s, Glen Rio symbolized everything great about the American road trip: freedom, exploration, and the romance of the open highway. But when Interstate 40 opened a few miles north of Glen Rio in 1975, it effectively diverted the endless streams of travelers away from the town's doorstep. Almost immediately, Glen Rio's businesses began to close. Without the travelers, there was no demand for gas, food, or lodging. And by the early 1980s, the town was virtually deserted. Today, visitors to Glen Rio can still see the original Glen Rio Motel sign, now rusting but still legible, standing above the cracked parking lot. The old gas stations with their cheerful 1950s canopies and pumps, they're still standing against the backdrop of the endless blue sky. Walking through Glen Rio now is kind of like stepping back into the golden age of the American road trip. It's a place where you can almost hear the laughter of families on summer vacations and the clinking of coffee cups at dusty dinners. Today, Glen Rio stands quietly against the desert wind, a beautiful and peaceful ghost town where the spirit of the open road lives on, not in the roar of engines, but in the silent echo of wide-open dreams. Number 10. Kayako, Turkey. In the hills on the coastline of southwestern Turkey lies Kayako, a hauntingly beautiful village of stone houses, chapels, and pathways, a place where history lingers. Its story begins centuries ago. During the medieval period, Greek Orthodox Christians began settling this region, building a village they called Levishi. Set into the hills above the sea, this community flourished, and by the 18th and 19th centuries, Kayako had become a town of about 6,000 residents, filled with well-crafted stone houses and more than a dozen churches and chapels. For generations, the Greek residents lived peacefully alongside Turkish neighbors in surrounding villages, sharing markets, festivals, and daily life. However, larger historical changes beyond the borders eventually altered its fate. In the aftermath of World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, tensions rose across the region. In 1923, following years of conflict, Turkey and Greece agreed to population exchange under the Treaty of Lausanne. That was a political arrangement that required Greek Orthodox citizens of Turkey to relocate to Greece, and Muslim citizens of Greece to move to Turkey. Kayako's entire population was part of this exchange. So the villagers packed what they could carry and left behind their homes, chapels, schools, and shops. The Muslims relocated to the area in Greece found it difficult to adapt, unfamiliar with the stone homes and the local farming practices. Many soon left for larger towns or cities. By the late 1920s, Kayako was largely deserted. Over the decades, the village weathered earthquakes, storms, and slow decay. Yet remarkably, much of it remains standing. Walking through the town today is a mesmerizing experience. Two large churches dominate the village center, their frescoes faded but still visible, their bells silent. Despite the abandoned state, it feels peaceful rather than sorrowful, a village simply returned to the embrace of nature. Today, it's preserved as a historical site and a museum village. Visitors can explore freely along the marked trails, climb to various viewpoints that offer amazing vistas of the valley. And in recent years, efforts have been made to stabilize some of the structures, protecting the village from further erosion. The story of this town is not one of disaster, but of peaceful memory. It's a village left in silence, where history rests gently among the stones. Number 9. Oradour-sur-Glane, France. In the countryside of western France is Oradour-sur-Glane, a ghost village preserved exactly as it was decades ago, serving not as a tragic site, but as a powerful reminder of remembrance. It was once a thriving rural community of about 650 residents. With its tree-lined streets, cafes, bakeries, shops, and a post office, the town was an ordinary, charming slice of French village life. The architecture was traditional for the region: stone houses with wooden shutters, narrow lanes winding between the homes, a central marketplace, and a modest civic building. In the years that followed the mid-20th century, a decision was made to leave the village untouched, to let the streets and buildings stand exactly where they were. A way to honor the history and people who live there without rebuilding or erasing what came before. Today, it's preserved as a memorial village overseen by France's Ministry of Culture. Nothing is staged or recreated here. Everything is left exactly as it was found. But rather than feeling somber, Oradour-sur-Glane carries a profound sense of calm and dignity. Wildflowers now sprout through cracks in the pavement, birds sing in the ruined window frames, and trees cast gentle shadows over the empty marketplace. Nature has softened the broken stones, wrapping the village in a gentle, timeless stillness. It reminds visitors of the importance of memory, how places can carry stories forward, even without words, even without people. Families visiting today find the village deeply moving, yet peaceful. It's a place where history is preserved with respect, where the spirit of a once vibrant community still lingers in the quiet beauty of stone and sky. Number 8. Pyramiden, Svalbard. On the edge of the Arctic Circle lies one of the most fascinating ghost towns, Pyramiden. It was once a thriving Soviet mining settlement on the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard, but today it stands frozen in time, a near-perfectly preserved Soviet community, where the past lingers in the chilling Arctic air. The story of Pyramiden begins in 1910, when Swedish explorers first founded the settlement, naming it after the nearby pyramid-shaped mountain. In 1927, the Soviet Union purchased the town from the Swedes and transformed it into a coal mining community. Despite its location, over 800 kilometers north of the Norwegian mainland, Pyramiden quickly grew into a lively, self-contained town, designed to showcase the Soviet ideal of community life. At its peak in the 1980s, it housed around 1,000 residents, mostly miners and their families. The town included apartment blocks, a hospital, a cultural center complete with grand theater and a music hall, and a swimming pool, then the northernmost pool in the world. Life in Pyramiden was carefully organized. Children attended school, workers enjoyed free access to cultural activities, and the town square, anchored by a bust of Lenin, served as the communal heart of daily life. Pyramiden's architecture reflected that classic Soviet style, functional, sturdy, and built for communal living rather than luxury. The colorful buildings, red, blues, and yellows, they're brightened by the Arctic landscape and stand out against the white of the glaciers. However, like many mining towns around the world, its existence depended entirely on the success of its coal operations. By the 1990s, economic changes and falling coal prices made the mine less profitable. Maintaining a remote settlement here was expensive, and as the Soviet Union dissolved and global energy markets shifted, the future of Pyramiden became uncertain. In 1998, the last remaining residents left. They boarded the ships back to mainland Russia, leaving behind a town almost exactly as it had been. Furniture still in apartments, books still on shelves, and musical instruments resting quietly in the cultural hall. Visiting Pyramiden now is like stepping directly into another world. It's like a place where history is still, where nature and human ambition coexist in harmony. Despite that frozen silence, it feels oddly peaceful. Reindeer and Arctic foxes now wander the empty streets. Wildflowers bloom during the brief Arctic summer, and the air is crisp and clear. The surrounding glaciers shine under the endless light of the midnight sun. Moving on to number 7, Humberstone, Chile. In the northern expanse of Chile's Atacama Desert, two ghost towns sit side by side, Humberstone and Santa Laura. The story of these two towns began in the 1870s during the global boom in saltpeter, that's sodium nitrate, that was a valuable mineral used for fertilizers and explosives. The Atacama Desert held rich nitrate deposits, and mining companies quickly moved in to exploit them. Santa Laura was founded first in 1872. Humberstone followed in 1875, and that was initially known as La Palma before being renamed in honor of British engineer James Thomas Humberstone, who developed improved refining techniques that made the extraction more efficient. Life in Humberstone and Santa Laura revolved around the saltpeter works. That was a sprawling industrial complex of boilers, distillation units, crushing mills, and chemical processing plants. However, the prosperity of Humberstone and Santa Laura was fragile. In the 1930s, the invention of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers drastically reduced the global demand for natural nitrate. Sales plummeted, mines closed, and workers left in search of new opportunities. By the 1960s, both towns were completely abandoned. But despite the passage of time, the climate in the Atacama, one of the driest on the Earth, preserved the towns in remarkable condition. Today, visitors can walk through the rusting remains of the processing plants, climb through the skeletal steel frameworks of machinery, and explore the carefully laid out streets and buildings. Rather than feeling eerie, Humberstone and Santa Laura feel poignant, powerful monuments to a vanished era of human ingenuity. In 2005, both towns were declared UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They recognized the significance as unique, irreplaceable relics of industrial history. Preservation efforts have helped stabilize many of the buildings and structures, which hopefully will allow future generations to experience the profound atmosphere of these desert ghost towns. Number 6. Fordlandia, Brazil. Deep in the Amazon rainforest is one of the strangest ghost towns in the world, Fordlandia. This place was once envisioned as a model American town transplanted to South America. Fordlandia today is a relic, a place where neat suburban streets, white picket fences, and abandoned factories sit quietly amid the jungle. Fordlandia was the brainchild of American industrialist Henry Ford. He was the founder of the Ford Motor Company. In the 1920s, Ford sought to secure a steady, independent source of rubber for his automobile tires at a time when the world's rubber supply was largely controlled by the British and Dutch colonial plantations. In 1928, Ford purchased about 2.5 million acres of Amazonian land in Brazil. His plan was ambitious, to build a sprawling rubber plantation complete with an all-American-style town for the workers, a place of modern efficiency. At first, Fordlandia grew quickly. Imported American managers supervised the construction of clapboard houses, sidewalks, a hospital, schools, a golf course, a power plant, and even a dance hall. Workers were expected to adapt to Ford's Midwestern ideals, eating hamburgers and white bread instead of traditional Brazilian foods. But the jungle had other plans. Ford's agricultural planners, unfamiliar with the Amazon's complexities, planted rubber trees in dense rows. That's the opposite of how wild rubber trees naturally grow scattered across the rainforest. This dense planting created the perfect conditions for leaf blight, insects, and disease, which quickly ravaged all the trees. At the same time, cultural clashes simmered. Local workers resented the foreign lifestyle imposed upon them, preferring their traditional foods, customs, and rhythms. In 1930, tensions erupted when workers staged a major strike that ended with riots and the temporary evacuation of American managers by boat. And then Fordlandia never fully recovered. In 1934, Ford moved his operation to a new site further downriver, Belchite, where conditions were slightly better. Rubber production at both sites remained disappointing, and by 1945, with the invention of synthetic rubber, Ford's Amazonian dream became unnecessary. Fordlandia was abandoned and left to the jungle. A small modern community now lives nearby, and occasional visitors explore the eerie beauty of the town. Though abandoned, Fordlandia is not a place of sadness. It's a fascinating blend of two worlds, where the dreams of the industrial age are still whispering among the endless green. It is a reminder that even the boldest of dreams have to adapt to the environment they enter, and that sometimes nature will write the final chapter. Number 5. Kolmanskop, Namibia. In the middle of Namibia's desert, a curious sight. Elegant European-style houses half buried by dunes, their wooden beams and faded pastel walls being slowly swallowed by golden sand. This is Kolmanskop, one of the world's most mesmerizing ghost towns. It was once a symbol of wealth and modernity, now a dreamlike relic of a lost era. The story of this place begins in 1908, when a railway worker named Zacharias Lewala stumbled upon a glittering stone while clearing tracks. The stone turned out to be a diamond, and the news of the find triggered a full-scale diamond rush that swept across the Namib desert almost overnight. Within a few years, Kolmanskop transformed from a barren wilderness into a thriving town. The wealth extracted from this desert was staggering. It's said that prospectors could simply lie on the sand at night and pick diamonds out of the ground under the moonlight. Lavish German-style villas rose up in the desert, their interiors filled with imported furnishings, grand staircases, and elegant stained glass windows. Kolmanskop was built for permanence, but the desert had other plans. By the 1920s, diamond supplies began to dwindle. Larger, richer deposits were being discovered further south, and gradually the town's importance faded. Residents began leaving in search of new fortunes, and by the 1950s, Kolmanskop was almost completely abandoned. Without people to maintain it, the desert immediately began its slow, steady reclamation. Sand poured through the broken windows and cracked walls. Living rooms, bedrooms, and corridors are filled with waist-deep fine desert sand, turning this once elegant home into a surreal indoor dune. Photographers from around the world are drawn here for that eerie, dreamlike atmosphere. The contrast between the vivid blue skies, the golden dunes, and crumbling pastel walls creates an otherworldly beauty rarely found anywhere else. Kolmanskop's legacy is one of quiet awe. It's a reminder that even the most prosperous human endeavors are fleeting when measured against the vastness of nature. Yet, unlike many ghost towns, Kolmanskop was not destroyed by violence or disaster. It simply drifted away, leaving behind an almost melancholic beauty. Number 4. St. Elmo, Colorado. In the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by peaks and pine forests, sits the well-preserved ghost town of St. Elmo. Unlike many abandoned places, this one feels less like a ruin and more like a small town that simply stepped back and let time pass it by. It's like a living museum of Colorado's gold rush days, filled with colorful history and mountain charm. St. Elmo was founded in 1880 during their booming silver and gold rush period. At its peak in the late 1800s, St. Elmo had a population of around 2,000 people. The town had all the trappings of the frontier prosperity: hotels, general stores, saloons, dance halls, a telegraph office, a town hall, a schoolhouse, and several churches. Its main street was buzzing with activity, stagecoaches arriving from Buena Vista, miners crowding into the saloons, and children laughing on their way to school. Life in St. Elmo wasn't easy, though. Winters were long and harsh, and snow often buried the town under several feet for months. Still, though, the residents thrived, carving out a vibrant community among this rugged wilderness. The beginning of St. Elmo's decline mirrored that of many mining towns. As the early 20th century wore on, mineral resources dwindled. In 1922, the railroad ceased operations, and that severed the town's link to the outside world. The mines closed and people began moving away in search of better opportunities. By the 1950s, St. Elmo was considered a ghost town. Now, St. Elmo is particularly famous for its photogenic appearance, with rustic wooden facades, vintage signs, and colorful window boxes bursting with summer flowers, all set against the backdrop of Colorado's Rocky Mountains. In the warm months, hummingbirds and chipmunks are darting through the abandoned streets, but in winter, heavy snow transforms this town into a quiet, shimmering wonderland. Unlike many ghost towns that feel eerie or desolate, St. Elmo feels almost cheerful. It's a place where the past lives on in the creak of old floorboards and the whisper of mountain winds. Number 3. Belchite, Spain. Unlike many ghost towns abandoned by economic decline, Belchite was intentionally left as it stood. Its roots stretch back to the 12th century, when it grew as a fortified town during the medieval Christian reconquest of Spain. Throughout the centuries, it flourished as an agricultural and market town, surrounded by olive groves, vineyards, and grain fields. But by the early 20th century, Belchite was a modest but lively town, home to around 3,000 residents. It had schools, mills, taverns, markets, the typical, vibrant life of rural Spain. However, in the late 1930s, Spain was engulfed in a brutal civil conflict. Rather than focusing on those events, it's enough to say that Belchite was caught in the middle of a major historical change. After the town was severely damaged, a decision was made to not rebuild it. Instead, a new Belchite was constructed nearby, while ruins of the old town were preserved as a memorial to the site. Today, Old Belchite is a remarkable open-air museum. Visitors can walk through the silent streets exploring the remains of stone houses, municipal buildings, and the imposing ruins of churches like San Martin de Tours and San Agustin. Rather than feeling sad or eerie, though, Belchite feels timeless. The warm Spanish sun lights the worn stones. Nature has gently softened the town's edges, weaving vines and blossoms into the cracks of ancient walls. Belchite has guided tours that explain its history, architecture, and the efforts to preserve that unique legacy, and restoration work has been carefully done to stabilize structures without altering the town's authentic character. Today, Belchite is a place of reflection and admiration, a ghost town that embraces its history, invites remembrance, and it stands proudly against the passing of time. Number 2. Houtouwan, Shenzhen Island, China. Once a thriving community, Houtouwan is now almost entirely abandoned, slowly and beautifully being reclaimed by nature. Ivy, moss, and flowering vines are covering the stone houses and winding alleyways, creating an incredible village that feels frozen in time. For centuries, fishing was the lifeblood of these remote islands. The waters of the East China Sea teemed with fish, and generations of families built their lives around the bounty of the sea. By the early 20th century, it had developed into a village of more than 2,000 residents. Small boats filled the harbor and the narrow stone streets were lined with houses and markets. But as China's economy modernized, life in isolated villages like this one became harder to sustain. In the 1980s and 90s, better education, healthcare, and job opportunities became available on the mainland and in larger coastal cities. The younger generations gradually left Shenzhen Island, seeking work elsewhere. Without the workforce to sustain it, Houtouwan's fishing industry declined sharply. By the early 2000s, the village was almost entirely abandoned. Without residents to maintain them, the houses quickly fell prey to the elements. Today, these houses are completely blanketed by vegetation. Thick vines creep up the staircases, moss coats the tiled roofs, and windows are framed in ivy. But unlike the harsh decay seen in many ghost towns, this one feels peaceful, almost enchanted. Birds and insects have made homes among the rafters, and sea breezes carry the scent of salt and flowering plants through the village. It's as if life itself has gently pulled the village back into its embrace. But local authorities, recognizing the appeal here, have made some efforts to preserve the site without disturbing that natural character. However, there are no large-scale commercial developments, and part of the village's magic is the quiet, untouched atmosphere. Some small signs of life have returned to the area. A few fishermen continue to use the island's harbors. Tiny guest houses and a few small cafes have popped up, serving adventurous travelers who make the ferry trip from mainland China. But the heart of Houtouwan remains untouched, a green dream that was slowly deepening with each passing season. In every crack between the stones, in every sunbeam filtering through ivy-covered roofs, there's a sense that life in Houtouwan didn't end, it simply changed form. Number 1. The Lost City of Petra, Jordan. Carved directly into red, pink, and golden stone, Petra is one of the most stunning abandoned places on Earth. It's a reminder of a once great civilization that was lost to time and sand. Today, Petra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the new 7 wonders of the world. But behind this beauty lies a fascinating story, one of ambition, ingenuity, and change. The origins of Petra date back as early as the 4th century BCE, when a nomadic Arab people known as the Nabateans settled in the region. They were master traders and engineers. They controlled critical trade routes that carried spices, incense, silk, and other precious goods between Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. At its height from about 100 BCE to 100 CE, Petra was thriving. It was home to an estimated 20 to 30,000 people, and wealth poured into the city from trade, and the Nabateans used that wealth to create one of the most astonishing architectural feats of the ancient world. Instead of building upward, they carved their city directly into the cliffs. Walking through Petra today is like stepping into a monumental art gallery that was shaped by human hands. The journey begins with the Seek, a narrow winding canyon with walls that go up to 80 meters high. As the path twists and turns, light and shadow dance across the pink and orange rock, building anticipation for what lies ahead. At the end of the Seek, the canyon suddenly opens up to reveal Petra's most famous structure, Al-Khazna, or the Treasury. with Greek-influenced columns, sculptures, and towering facade carved directly into the cliff. The treasury is a breathtaking sight, nearly 40 meters or 130 feet high, glowing with the colors of the desert sun. But Petra is more than just the treasury. Exploring deeper into the city reveals hundreds of structures, tombs, temples, an enormous theater that once seated over 8,000 people, grand staircases, monumental gates, and a complex water management system. The Nabateans engineered an elaborate network of dams, cisterns, and aqueducts, all to capture and control the rainwater. However, no civilization is immune to change. In 106 CE, the Roman Empire annexed the Nabatean kingdom, and while Petra remained an important center for some time, new sea trade routes eventually bypassed the city, reducing its economic importance. A series of earthquakes between the 4th and 6th centuries dealt further blows, damaging many of Petra's structures and water systems. And by the early medieval period, Petra had largely been abandoned. Today, Petra's significance goes far beyond its beauty. It offers profound insights into their culture, their architectural innovation, religious practices, and artistry. And one of the most unforgettable experiences here at Petra is the nighttime tour called Petra by Night. Hundreds of candles are lit along the Seek and in front of the treasury, bathing the stone in a soft, flickering glow. It reminds us that even the greatest cities, no matter how ingeniously built or magnificently adorned, can fade into memory when nature reclaims the stage. Petra is not a city of sadness, it is a city of wonder. It shows that even in abandonment, there is dignity, splendor, and a deep connection between humanity and the land. It's a place where history breathes through the stone, where every step is a step in the heart of an ancient dream that, though silent, has never truly died.